Thank you for joining us at BIB Today, the daily podcast from the newsroom of business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. Genome BC is the nonprofit British Columbian center of the federally financed Genome Canada organization that leads the way in funding major investments in developing new genomic technologies. And in recent months, of course, it's taken on a significant role in advancing our understanding of COVID-19 through several research projects and investments in its own way. My guest today is here to discuss its role, what is being learned, and where the priorities are in research for the organization. Pascal Spothelfer is its CEO. Good to have you here today.
Pleasure, Kirk.
You've come in from the Swiss Alps to join us. Thank you so much.
Yes, the background's beautiful.
That's what we're living with. We're living with a lot of backgrounds right now. Listen, there are so many options and so many opportunities to learn things here and to do important research. Where does an organization like yours start in COVID?
Well, we start with 20 years of background and experience of funding, promoting research in genomics, and in pulling the ecosystem together and to have a very good understanding who does what in British Columbia, and being able to bring people and organizations together. So that's the starting point.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a substantial network of researchers and organizations that were already somewhat hovering around a field like coronaviruses to be able to start this research pretty quickly?
Yeah, I mean, genomics is really molecular biology, and BC has a long tradition and has a lot of strength in the area of viruses and public health, etc. And the best expression of that is the BC Centre for Disease Control, which is really a unique organization as far as provincial organizations go in Canada, which has very good depth and expertise in genomics that is being used in the field of infectious diseases and public health. And so it is not a coincidence that in late January, we got a call from the BC Centre for Disease Control. They were looking for some funding to sequence the coronavirus. And we turned that around within days. And at the end of January, the center had done its first viral sequence. And at the time, that might not have been that big a point. But now that we are doing virus surveillance and looking for variants, this is the type of work that started a year ago.
Yeah, very, very prescient. I wonder whether during the pandemic itself, some of your own processes had to become even more nimble in order to get on with research in a hurry when you knew what kind of urgency there was out there.
Yes, and we reacted to the coronavirus, to the epidemic in March by launching a rapid response funding program, where we launched the program within about 10 days of making the decision to allocate the funding. We then had a 2-week process through which we got 185 proposals. We funded 13 of them and launched them immediately in collaboration with the researchers and the academic institutions. And these projects, some of them have been extended, others are now coming to an end. So they really had to be executed very fast. And they led to interesting results in some areas. They led to interesting innovations in others. But we moved very, very quickly to fund these projects. And to date, over the past 12 months, we have launched 23 projects that are COVID related.
So what are emerging, Pascal, as the areas where you think the Genome BC funded research can make a difference?
It's very interesting because when the whole research in the coronavirus and the epidemic started, nobody really knew that much. And it was very unclear where the priorities would lie. So you said it was prescient to start the virus sequence in January, February 2020. Yes, it was. And the focus has shifted tremendously. So the focus originally was really around testing capacity, testing capabilities, finding who would be more susceptible to difficult disease, to extended disease, and who would not have these difficulties. So this research has started very early. We then went into serology testing and looked at what can be done to look for antibodies. And we're now very much in disease treatment improvements, variant surveillance, and vaccine research to find which vaccines are more efficacious, have higher efficacies in the actual application. So it's changed over time.
Yeah, I want to pick up right away, though, on the vaccination effort, because, of course, it probably provides all kinds of opportunities for research in all of this. How do you think the Genome BC research, again, will align with the vaccination effort to learn as much as we can?
I think at this point, our focus is on supporting efforts to provide real-time or near real-time information to the public health officials. There is, at a later phase, there will be research done that analyzes the vaccines, how have they worked, have they prevented transmission, have they prevented disease. But I think right now the focus is provide as much information to the public health officials, to Bonnie Henry and her team, so they can make decisions on the spot. So, for instance, there's research that now shows that longer intervals between the first and the second shot work and will not reduce the efficacy of the vaccine. This is crucial information for the allocation of vaccines between first and second shot. It's that type of research that we will be supporting now.
Yeah, and I want to ask too about the relationships that you have with Dr. Henry's office, obviously with other researchers across the country and around the world, to get a bit of an understanding of sometimes where the impetus comes for you to suddenly, get onto some pieces of research. Surely some of this must also come from the field where there's obviously a policy requirement or a policy answer that's required here, and that research can help.
Yes, so our scientifically, I think we work very closely with the BC Centre for Disease Control, and the BC CDC is the scientific arm supporting Dr. Henry and her team in making these decisions, and that's where our scientific linkage comes from. There's also the Strategic Research Advisory Committee that the government has put in place, chaired by David Patrick, who is also the Director of Research for the BC CDC. So we're working closely with that. We're working with our colleagues at the Michael Smith Foundation to make sure that we coordinate our funding. And federally, Genome Canada is coordinating efforts through a large program called CancoGen, which leads in the national surveillance of virus variants by coordinating the sequencing of viruses across the country. So all these things work together, and we are in regular communication with all of these people so that we can direct our research efforts appropriately.
Yeah. On a broader scale, Pascal, what do you think the pandemic has done to governments in their recognition and in their enhancement of research in this country?
It may be too early to tell, because I think there is a recognition right now of how important science is, how important research capacity is, and how important these networks are that we're using now to coordinate efforts and to mobilize efforts very quickly. You can't create these linkages overnight. So it's the work that has happened over the past 20 years that allows the quick reaction. Now, once the pandemic's over, it will be important that we continue these efforts, that we have a much better pandemic preparedness. And I think if you look at the lessons learned from SARS, it was very important for a short period of time, and then the efforts waned again. And I think we cannot make the same mistake again. And the impact of this pandemic on society overall, on the economy, etc., is much larger than SARS was at the time. And hopefully this will have a lasting effects and influence the decision making going forward.
Yeah, so I mean, does the scope of what the pandemic has wrecked in our society, do you think teach us really that you can't take your foot off the gas now?
Well, I think there are several elements. One is the speed at which this pandemic has gone global and has become a pandemic has been absolutely frightening. And this is due to our lifestyles today and the globalization, etc. And I think not the future pandemics will have similar patterns. The other thing is the deep impact it had on lives, the number of deaths, the impact on the healthcare system that in Canada sustained it quite well, but some healthcare systems like the one in Italy collapsed under the case burden. And then we also saw the challenges of relying on others when it comes to the necessities of fighting a pandemic, be it the personal protective equipment, be it vaccines, be it drugs, be it syringes. And the lack of our capacity or the lack of capability in Canada to be self-sufficient in some of these areas has also been shown fairly dramatically over the past few months.
You said earlier that it might be too early to tell some things, really some lessons yet out of all of this. But is there any kind of understanding yet of how the pandemic is revealing both our strengths and our challenges as researchers in this country?
Well, I think the research in this country, in this region, and globally actually has been absolutely stunning. The fact that we have a new technology to develop vaccines with the messenger RNA within 10 months is absolutely stunning. And the fact that these vaccines could be produced that quickly, that we gained an understanding of the COVID-19 disease that quickly is really a testament to scientific capacity, but also to the willingness of scientists to share information and to collaborate on a global scale. So I think the science has worked really well. When you go to the response involving logistics, involving data sharing, and these kind of aspects within our health system, we know are difficult. There we have big lessons to learn, and we must get our act together to make sure that we have good data sharing systems in place so that we can actually have a national response versus having the response of provinces and territories that are not really that well coordinated.
Well, that tees up my last question, which is in that vein, which is what do you hope would be in place next time we face a pandemic that wasn't this time?
Well, I would hope that we have the data linkages, the data integration, and the data sharing in place, that all the provinces and territories can benefit from one another's experience, that we can assemble these data and come to actionable conclusions much faster. I would hope that we have the capacity in place from a sequencing and testing point of view, that we can roll out sequence and testing very quickly, so that this capacity is on a standby level. And the third aspect is that we have enough vaccine, drug, and equipment sovereignty in the country that we're not depending on others to actually mobilize these responses.
Yeah, I don't think anyone feels we can let this happen again.
No, I don't think so. And I think we have to be very, very careful that we don't forget that many people not only die, but suffer tremendously in this pandemic. And yes, the pandemic will go away, but these scars will be left over for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, Pascal, it's great talking to you. Congratulations on a lot of this work. It's been so swift in making a response, and I think British Columbians are quite proud of the kind of work that's being done here. But thanks for your time today. My pleasure. Thank you for your interest. Pascal Spothelfer is the CEO of Genome BC. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief of Business in Vancouver. Thanks a lot for watching.